Hello and welcome to Communicate with Confidence from the Fire Inside. My name is Vanessa King, and in the next 40 minutes or so I'm going to take you through a presentation that will give you just some basic building blocks for putting together a really effective speech. I'm so lucky right now because I'm sitting outside in my backyard and the sun is shining and it's just the most perfect place to be. So I'm really looking forward to guiding you through some tips and ideas for how you can get your presentations to be really effective. I am hugely passionate about the work I do because I really believe that great communication skills changes people's lives. It changes the lives of people around you, and it changes the world. So if I can play just a small part in helping you change yourself, your life and your world, I'm just delighted to be a part of it. So let's go. So the objectives for the next 35 to 40 minutes that we'll be spending together are these. We're going to look at the three key components of any presentation. Doesn't matter if it's 60 seconds or an hour long. There's always these three basic components. We're going to go through two of them in detail today, and then when we meet face to face, we'll go through the third component. I'll also be incorporating within that how to tell your story, because it's by telling stories that we really connect with the people around us. And finally, you'll come away knowing how to really connect with and inspire your audience. So, there are three key components to any presentation. The first one is the material you've got. It's like the bricks and the mortar and the tools that you need to build a house. And right now, you've got a huge pile of material, and what you really need to do is select the right material for your audience. More on that in a moment. The second component is the structure of your speech. This is like the frame of the house. It's the frame waiting to be filled with your carefully selected material. And finally, you put those two things together with the way you deliver your speech, the body language, the vocal variety, your expressions, the way you use your voice. You put all of those things together with the structure and the material that you've chosen to put together a complete, effective, amazing presentation. So selecting a topic, well, this can be really hard. There's just no two ways about it. If I asked you to think of a topic right now, I'm sure you would have an idea, but you might also draw a complete blank, and not because you can't think of anything, but there's just so much. Do I talk about body language? Do I talk about choosing stories? Do I talk about what my passion is? Why am I here? What's my point in existence? You know, you could choose anything. I've spoken about shoes and networking and saying yes to my inner self. You know, to that voice inside that is making me do things. Say yes to it. But yeah, you've got to choose the one that's right for your audience. And sometimes that can be really difficult. So I'd like to give you a bit of a framework for suggesting that choosing your topic. So basically there's three types of things that you could choose. You've got things that you know about, there are things that you love, and then there are the things that your audience cares about. Well, topics you know, I'm sure you could list off a whole pile of stuff. I mean, I know about how to check the oil in my car. I know about trigonometry because in a past life I used to be a maths teacher. I know about planting potatoes, but I'm not really particularly excited about it. That doesn't really get me going, and it's the same for you. You've got topics that you know about, but perhaps you're not really passionate about. And if you're not really passionate, it can be very, very hard to connect with your audience on that visceral level that makes them feel connected, that connects them with you. You could choose a topic that you love. I mean, that you're crazy about. Once you start talking about it, you just can't shut up. I mean, for example, if I start talking about public speaking, how it's changed my life, I just start talking. I could talk about it for ages, which is fine if I'm talking to people who are interested and who can relate to my story. But if it's a bit boring for them, quite frankly, if I'm just rabbiting on about something that they've got no idea. So yeah, so you can choose a topic you love, but you do need to be careful. You can choose a topic that your audience cares about, which is generally the best thing to go for, since they're the ones who are coming to talk to you, coming to listen to you. But of course, it can be tricky if you don't actually know anything about what it is that they're really into. But the best thing is, if you go for a topic that your audience cares about, it might just overlap with stuff that you know and stuff that you're incredibly passionate about. That's the best topic. That's the choose topics here bit of this graphic. But if it's a topic that your audience cares about and you don't know anything about, don't worry. You can always find out about it, and you never know, you might just find a new passion. I was really sort of surprised to find myself asked to speak on networking, and I thought, how am I going to talk about networking? But I realized I've learned a lot about it. I've learned what I don't like about networking, and why I didn't want to do it, and why I do love networking now, and why it's so powerful. So actually the impetus was being asked to speak on networking, and that made me realize that actually I do know a lot about it, and yes, I do love talking about it as well. So don't shy away from a speaking opportunity just because you think you might not know about the topic that they want you to speak on. Say yes, and you will find out a new passion. I've no doubt about it. So, stories. If you really want to connect with your audience in a memorable way, in a permanent way, use stories. Maya Angelou said, she's my favorite author, I love her, she said that people don't remember what you say to them. They don't remember the words that you say, but they remember how you made them feel. And it's completely true. I mean, if you just think about any conversation you've had, you don't remember the exact words that you used, let alone the words your conversation partner used. But you do remember how that conversation made you feel, whether you enjoyed it, whether you felt uncomfortable, whether you were challenged or you learnt something new. So tell stories. Stories help us to connect with another person's point of view on an emotional level. The stories you use can be your own or someone else's, and they don't have to be these amazing, climbing Mount Everest type stories. It can just be little stories like what happened when you started smiling at your neighbours on a regular basis, or what happened down the supermarket one day. It doesn't have to be these life-changing, I nearly died, I did something incredible type story, because sometimes people can't relate to those big stories. So everyday stories that are yours can have a lot of power. So I really recommend that you get yourself a journal and you just make a few points about the weird things that happened to you today. You can use other people's stories, of course. There's no rule that says it has to be your own story, but I've got two sort of cautions about using other people's stories. First of all, you can say the story happened to someone else, because it did, but this can have the effect of emotionally distancing you from your audience, because you're bringing in a third party into the conversation, because a speech or a presentation really is a conversation between you and your audience. And if you sort of bring in a third party, they might start to feel a little bit, what's going on here? I'm feeling a bit confused about what's this third person talking about. So I'd be a little bit wary about using other people's stories and saying that it happened to someone else. The other thing is, you could claim the story actually happened to you. So, for example, I've heard of someone who said as part of their speech that they did military service, that they had lots of children. Well, they didn't do military service and they don't have kids. So the audience could either be absolutely none the wiser and enjoy your presentation as it was, and great, hooray. But if they do find out that you didn't do military service and you don't have kids, they might feel let down or even lied to, because if you didn't tell the truth on that little bit, then maybe you don't have authority or credibility or believability even for the rest of your speech. So take care when using other people's stories. I think really if you've got someone else's story that you really like, that really resonates with you, I think if you actually looked at your own life, there's bound to be something similar that's happened to you that could illustrate the same point. So perhaps if you're inspired by someone else's story, have a look at your own experience and see if there's something similar. If you would like to find out more about discovering your stories, just let me know, because there's a whole other thing. We could talk for hours on discovering your stories. So stories are just the first part of the material that you've got for your speech. You've also got supporting information from external sources. So things like news articles, books, letters, statistics, all of these things can really add a lot of realism to your speech. It means that you can translate really abstract ideas into much more concrete terms for people. If I give you an example, if you say directly setting your tyre pressures improves your mileage, so what does that mean to me? Well, it could save you £500 a year. That's a lot more meaningful, because I can relate to money, and I don't really relate to mileage. I don't think about that. I think about how much money I put in my petrol tank every year. Statistics can have an emotional impact, and they make your speech that much more memorable. If you're going to use statistics, try to use ones that are really surprising and ensure that they're closely related to the message you're trying to convey. So, and my final tip, I suppose, with statistics is don't rely on your audience to understand the implication of the statistic that you've presented. Explain the connection between it and your message explicitly. Say something as direct as, "This is important because." So, an example of how to do that. Did you know that at least 30% of the neurons in your brain are directly involved with vision? This percentage increases to over 50% when you include other skills such as memory, movement, and navigation of our surroundings, all of which are really closely connected to vision. This is important because it suggests that a lot of what we remember and understand needs to be delivered in a visual way. So these two images that I'm showing you now were two that I used in a presentation about communicating with confidence for a company. And so I used the image of the asteroid striking the planet to represent impact. You want to have a beginning of your speech that has impact. And the other image there of a man with wobbly legs underneath a spotlight and feeling very small is how people often feel when they're starting to speak in public. It's like you're the center of attention, you're in the spotlight, and if it wasn't for the lectern, you'd probably fall down. So I think it probably conveys the feelings quite well. And to be honest, sometimes it's not remembering the exact words that the person says, but it's the images that really stick in your mind. Images and props as well. I saw a speech once. I cannot remember most of what he was talking about, but I do remember that he had a hammer, and I remember it was Seth Godin. He's a marketing guy. I actually can't remember anything about the speech except that. But he used it to illustrate that to a person with a hammer, everything looks like a nail. Every problem looks like a nail. which is really, it's fine, because I can just look up Seth Godin and the hammer, and then I can find his speech, or I can find something that he's written, and find the reference to what he was talking about. Technology is a wonderful thing, and the prop actually made his speech stick in my mind, so I could think to myself, what was that guy with the hammer talking about? Oh yeah, to a person with a hammer, every problem looks like a nail. So basically, you can use anything you like to enhance your presentation. You can use stories, you can use statistics and letters and books and articles, newspaper articles and journal articles. You can use props. You can use anything you want with just one proviso. The statistic, the image, the story, or the prop must serve your key message and not detract from it. If it's fun and cool, but it's a diversion, ditch it. If it really is very cool and lots of fun, write another speech that really needs it. Now you've got a topic you love and a topic that your audience cares about. You've got memorable stories, supporting evidence and images. It's time to craft a speech that really makes your audience sit up and go, wow. There are 3 really important points to consider when writing your speech. Firstly, you want to have an impactful opening, one that captures the audience's attention immediately. You want to have a main body with a clear structure and a concluding sentence that your audience will be discussing over coffee afterwards. So lots of people ask me how I start writing a speech. There are different ways of doing it, and there's no such thing as the right way. It's just the way that works for you. So when I'm writing, I generally start my speeches at the end. I think about where I want my audience to be at the end of my speech. Sorry, I just need some water then. So I think about where I want them to be at the end. Do I want them to seek more information? Do I want them to be thoughtful, argumentative, emotional? Basically, what issue or challenge do I want them to be discussing as they collect their belongings and move towards the door? As the smell of coffee and pastries wafts towards them, what gem will have them completely preoccupied and totally uninterested in the treats that await them? Then I think about the opening sentence that will really grab their attention. This could be a quote, a provocative question, a statement, a story. You should try to make it really punchy, because you've already got your audience's attention and you want to reward them for giving it to you before they've even heard you speak. So whatever you do, don't start with an apology. The opening really you want people to say, you know what, oh, I'm so glad I'm here. This is the best place for me. I know that this person is just going to really look after me tonight. That's pretty much what you want your opening sentence to do. Finally, the body of your speech should have a really clear structure. Your speech is a journey with your audience in the passenger seat. They're happy to let you drive, but they will feel much safer if they feel confident that you know where you're going. And you can give them that confidence with a clear structure. So let me see if I'll give you a short example of a speech that I did for an election at the beginning of May. No, it wasn't a council election. It was one for my public speaking club, or my public speaking organisation that I'm involved with, called Toastmasters International. I wanted the audience to vote for me, so the concluding sentence was going to be pretty self-evident. My opening sentence, however, was really quite risky, because I said, Toastmasters ruined my life. Now, since I was standing for election to a Toastmasters role, was speaking to a bunch of Toastmasters, that statement was really very provocative and attention-grabbing, because they would have been sitting up in their seats going, what is this woman on about? She is nuts. What does she mean, Toastmasters ruined her life? So what I did was I followed that with a very quick rundown, because remember it's only a 2-minute speech. I spent about 30 seconds talking about why I would possibly conclude that Toastmasters ruined my life, because basically within a year of joining Toastmasters I had lost my job, I'd moved house, I'd sold my car, and I got divorced. Like, you know, what? I was in a bit of a spin, I've got to tell you. But then I went on to talk about how Toastmasters saved my life, because without the skills and the support that I got from my club, I wouldn't have been able to take this new situation that I found myself in and turn it into a business where I actually get to serve people just like you. Never would have happened without Toastmasters, and that's what I talked about in my speech. I concluded with the line, "Vote for me. Give me the opportunity to ruin more lives." Pretty risky tactic, but I did win the election, so results count. I'd like to give you one way now of visualizing the overall structure of a speech. People do things in different ways. This is my suggestion. Oh, my cat's come to say hello. So you always have an opening, I've already said that, and the T's mnemonic there I'll go into in a moment. So you have your opening, then you have a body which is made up of points of wisdom, and each point of wisdom has a story, a statistic, a quote, some sort of supporting information to illustrate that point. I love this structure. Oh, and obviously you've got your conclusion as well. Just to tack that on the end. I really love this structure. It's incredibly flexible in 3 different ways. If you've only got a short speech, you still have your opening and your conclusion, but you just have, say, 1 point of wisdom with 1 story. So it's really short. The longer your speech is, you just put in more points of wisdom and more supporting stories. If you find that you've got less time than you thought, you can cut content at the last minute. If you can just cut out a supporting example, or you could cut out an entire point of wisdom if you had to. Finally, this structure is fantastic for helping you to remember your speech. You could basically write the points of wisdom down in dot points on the back of a business card just to prompt yourself as you're speaking, and it's all there. It all just falls into place. Let's talk a little bit more now about T's. T's is a really neat mnemonic I discovered on a website called 6 Minutes. It's the URL's there, 6minutes.dluggan.com. There are fantastic tips and ideas and loads of technical information, all sorts of stuff for speakers. If you want to find out more, go and have a look at it. It's really awesome. The guy is actually a Toastmaster from Canada, and he's even more crazy into public speaking than me. So, yeah, thinking about your opening sentence for speeches. So, I always think about the opening. I always think about the audience's feelings. That's just the kind of person I am. I'm an emotional kind of connecting type person, and I think about their feelings. So, when they've walked in the door, they've given me their money and their time. And their time actually is more valuable than the money that they've given me. And so I want them to feel that they've made the right decision as soon as I've opened my mouth. I want them to have a strong sense of, oh, thank goodness I'm here. She's going to be really good value. I want them to feel in safe hands, that for however long I'm spending with them, it will be time well spent. This T's framework might help you to create an opening that gives your audience that same feeling. So T is for testimonial. Cite the behavior of a celebrity or a quote an influential person that the audience will know and respect. For example, Pericles, the great Greek orator, also understood the significance of public speaking when he said, "The person who can think and does not know how to express what he thinks is at a level of him who cannot think." And then you would go into a speech about public speaking and why it's so important. Evidence. E is for evidence. Explain how public speaking impacted your career. You could give a piece of statistical information here. For example, a University of Michigan survey of 1,290 business school alumni who were recently promoted were asked what specific subject area prepared them the most for their business success. More than 70% cited effective communications as the top business skill. Evidence. A is for anecdote. You could tell a story about how someone benefited directly from their public speaking expertise. What difference does it make to be able to speak? An example of an anecdote might be the following. Isabel lived alone for the first 6 years of her life. Very alone in her silent world, she lived only with her reclusive mother, who also could not speak, because she was a deaf-mute. Isabel was so isolated from other people she had no chance to learn or practice speaking. When authorities finally rescued her from her silent and isolated world, she seemed uneducable. But after being around people who could speak, Isabel broke out of her silent world. In 1 week, she vocalized sounds. In 2 months, she spoke in full sentences. In just 16 months, she had learned 2,000 words, and in 56 months, her IQ tripled, in part due to the power of being around people who could speak. Anecdote. S is for statement. Make a statement on the significance of your topic, for example, public speaking, on the quality of life. For example, Adlai Stevenson eulogized Winston Churchill by saying, "Public speaking is the sine qua non of leadership. Without it, you cannot lead. With it, you can lead nations, raise armies, inspire victories, and blow fresh courage into the hearts of men." So a statement about the significance of your topic. And the last one, E, is for example. An example of a person whose career really took off because of whatever it is that you're talking about. For myself, I'm doing a completely different job now. I used to be, well, I am still a teacher. I still think of myself as a teacher, but I used to be a maths and science teacher working in a school. And now I'm doing something that I never imagined. I honestly did not imagine that I would not be working in a school and that I would be sitting in my lovely sunny backyard with my cat on the table talking to you about something I love. It's just amazing. It's wonderful. Anyway, get back on track. So, some ideas for what sort of things you could choose for your opening. But whatever you choose, it's all about making the audience feel like they're in the right place and that you're going to take care of them. I'm just putting this slide up again to remind you about the structure of your speech, because the body of it in particular, because the body is obviously where the main content of your message is. The body is going to be made up of the points that you want to make, and each point divided into supporting examples. You probably have picked up that I'm talking a lot about things in threes. 3 points, 3 examples per point. That must be the cat. Per point. 3 examples per point. It's really the most effective structure for several reasons. It seems to be the easiest way for a speaker to remember what she wants to say. I've personally found that to be true. It's also very easy for the audience to follow your thinking as you go. It tends to be true that if you have fewer than 3 points, your message can seem a bit brief and superficial, that you haven't really given them enough to get their teeth into. Get their teeth into. And more than 3 points, your presentation can start to get a bit laborious and a bit tedious. The supporting examples are the material that you've collected, the stories, statistics, the quotes that give credibility, emotion and logic to your presentation. You've probably noticed that the sentence I just said was made up of 2 lots of 3. I said the supporting examples are made up of the material you have collected, the stories, statistics and quotes that give credibility, emotion and logic to your presentation. And it just makes that sentence more memorable and it flows. So here are some ideas for some three-part outlines for a presentation. The basic one is tell them what you're going to say it, tell them what you said. It can seem a little bit condescending, but it actually works incredibly well, because human beings are not actually that great at remembering the things that we're told, the things that we just hear. If we just hear something once, we're not likely to remember the vast majority of it. We remember things when we're told several times. We remember things when they make us feel good, or things that we've physically done. So telling the audience where they're going, and for goodness sake following that course. There's no point in saying, we're going to go down this road and then you go down somewhere else completely different, because they're just going to feel lost. So tell them what you're going to say it, and then remind them of where they've been. It's a really great way, a really effective way to get your message across. It's a bit like saying, I suppose, we're going to go to Greece for our holiday, and you actually go to Greece, and then when you get back, you tell people about Greece and show them the pictures. I hope that makes sense. It'd be a pretty rubbish holiday if your travel agent said, you're going to go to Greece, and you end up in Antarctica. It wouldn't be that much fun. Past, present and future. This is fairly straightforward. You just basically talk about what happened before, what's going on now, and what things might be like in the future. So if I was going to talk about genetics, for example, I might talk about what the scientific understanding was like in the 20th century and how the structure of DNA was developed, and then I would talk about how we use genetics now for treating all sorts of diseases and developing drugs, and actually what the implications might be for our understanding of genetics in the future. So ethics of various types of treatments and cloning and genetic engineering and all that. That's a fairly simple, straightforward sort of structure. Complication, resolution and example. So with this structure, your opening introduces the situation. The body is a series of complications and resolutions, and the conclusion is obviously the finish of the story. An example of this format might be just, think of the common fairy tale Goldilocks and the Three Bears. The situation is Goldilocks goes for a walk. She comes across a cottage. She's tired and she's hungry and she's thirsty, so she goes in. Now we go into the body of the story, and that's all about our protagonist, Goldilocks, trying the porridge, the chairs and the beds. Notice the threes are going on here too, the porridge, and we've got Mama Bear, Papa Bear and Baby Bear. So threes within threes within threes. So the body is Goldilocks trying these three things, and the conclusion is the bears coming home and obviously being justifiably upset at the chaos that Goldilocks has wrought. 3 main points. For example, exercise is great for your bones, helps you sleep better and makes you feel better. That's pretty simple. So then your speech would be talking about the evidence that it's good for your bones, the evidence that it helps you sleep better, and that it makes you feel happier. You could have 3 stories. Each story should have a point to make that supports your conclusion. Really, remember, everything that in the body has to drive your audience towards your conclusion. It's got to be completely in line with it, otherwise it's just going to distract your audience and they're going to wonder what on earth that was all about. So remember, your stories must have a point that support your conclusion. For example, if you want to convince your audience that setting your intention really does work, have 3 stories that illustrate that. I know I've said it before, I'm going to say it again. Please make sure your stories really do support your contention, because otherwise the speech becomes a series of possibly interesting but disjointed stories that leave your audience wondering what the point was. And I'm speaking from personal experience, having sat through a 45-minute presentation that was supposed to be 15 minutes long, and all she did was just tell story after story after story, and I'm thinking, what is she talking about? I was completely lost. You don't want to do that to your audience. Last idea for a speech outline is the pros, the cons, and the recommendation. So this is particularly good for convincing an audience to take action on something. If you only present the good things, then people will say, yeah, but what about this? And if you only present the bad things, people will say, oh, well, she's just ranting. If you present the positives and the negatives and then have your own opinion at the end, you're taking into account both sides and you're presenting a much more balanced view of the issue. Therefore, your recommendation will have much more credibility. Okay, so far you've got an idea about how to start your speech in a way that really captures your audience's attention, and I've given you just a few ideas for possible structures for your speech, and just keeping it simple with 3-part structure is really effective. So what I'd like to do for you now is to give you a couple of tips on language structures that you could use to make your speech more effective. Now, there are a load of different ways to use language. It's been written about since the ancient Greeks. So there's just a whole stack of information out there, and today I just want to share with you 2 main ways that I use a lot, and I use them because I think they're just so effective at connecting your audience with your message on a really meaningful level. So see, the best learning happens when you connect someone's understanding when you connect someone's existing understanding to the new concept that you're introducing in your presentation. And a metaphor and an analogy, they're very similar, are really great mechanisms to connect what's known with what's new. So a metaphor it creates a bridge, basically. So, for example, you might think about a library being a birthplace of ideas. So you can excite people's minds about, say, the importance of doing research by saying, a library isn't just a place with lots of books and information. You should go there. You can say, a library is the birthplace of new ideas, because you never know what you're going to find out. If you want to convince people to eat healthy, you could say that fruit are God's sweets. They're God's lollies, or the universal, or the Mother Earth, whatever you want to say. But it's an analogy. Instead of saying that fruit is fruit and therefore it's boring because we know we're supposed to eat fruit because it's good for us, we could say that no, we really like sweets. Do you know what? Fruit is the planet's sweets. It's God's sweets. Look at it. It's bright and colourful and attractive, and it's good for you. Much more interesting than you should eat fruit. I have to say that in addition to my work with helping people develop their public speaking skills, I still teach kids, and I love it very much. I teach them science and maths, and I use analogies a lot in maths. Now, analogies are incredibly effective at helping people to understand a new process. So rather than just a metaphor will paint a picture that will stick in someone's mind, like a library being a birthplace or fruit being like sweets. But an analogy gives you an idea about a process, relating it to something that you already know. So let me give you an example. For example, DNA is like an enormous library of recipe books. And each recipe is a gene that tells the body how to make the particular protein that it needs to function. Okay, so that's just an example of how DNA works, and I've used that many times in my teaching. In fact, I opened this presentation with an analogy. I talked about the components of presentations being material, which is like the bricks, mortar and tools. The structure of your speech is the framework, and the delivery puts the two things together, the material and the structure, to give you a complete house. Another analogy could be the way the human body reacts to not having breakfast. It's a bit like putting petrol in your car. You really wouldn't expect to get very far. So these are just two ways you can use language to deliver your message more effectively, and they really help you to connect with your audience in a meaningful, memorable way. There are loads more, but this is just two I hope you'll find really helpful in your writing. So that's the body. The last bit, of course, is the conclusion. In some respects, the conclusion really is the most important part of your presentation. I mean, obviously the opening is important because it keeps their attention. The body is important because you want to have a structure that makes it easy for people to follow. But your conclusion is really important because it's the last thought that you will be giving your audience as they leave. So if everything was great, if you had a really punchy opening and your body was great, you had really powerful messages with excellent supporting material, it's going to be worth nothing if you end it with a whimper. So when you're thinking about conclusion, think about the fact that it's going to be the last thought that they will be talking about as they leave. So make it valuable, make it predictable, and make it rewarding. A conclusion has value when it encourages your audience to make a change or do something different as a consequence of your talk. It might be a personal change, such as, say, diet or exercise. It might be simply that they want to find out more about your topic because you only gave them an introduction. It could be a really inspiring speech that makes them want to do more in the world, that makes them feel empowered to make real changes in the world through what they've learned at your presentation. Whatever it is, whatever the purpose of your speech, it has to have value. It might seem a bit strange for me to suggest that your conclusion should be predictable. And this is what I mean by that is that it should follow logically from all of the points you've presented in the main body. So it should reflect the destination that your audience was probably expecting to reach as you delivered your opening. So the conclusion, to go back to the example of going on holiday, it's the photos of Greece after you've been on your Greek holiday. It's not the photos of Antarctica stuck on the end, because that would just be disconcerting and confusing. So in a sense, I feel that your conclusion really needs to be predictable. It's like when the ending of a book or a film isn't quite all that you'd hoped for. I mean, even if the rest of the film was great, you're still not likely to recommend it because it left you feeling bereft in some way. Never do that to an audience. Finally, your conclusion should be rewarding. And by that, I mean make them feel like they feel their time has been well spent. So how could you conclude? Well, to stick with my pattern of recommending things in threes, here are 3 ideas for concluding your speech. You could go full circle. I quite like this one. This is probably my favourite ending for a speech. Example of full circle is when you take your audience back to the beginning, where it was that you started from. So an example of that, I heard a speech just recently. It started with a story. The speaker is 10 years old and his dad has just thrown him into the water. But we don't actually, so we're kind of left at mid-air. You know, if you can imagine this boy, he's been picked up by his dad, he's thrown into the water and he's in mid-air. And then he transitions to another part of it, to the rest of his speech. We don't actually hear the end of that story until the end of the speech, when we come back to the 10-year-old, he's in mid-air and splash, he hits the water and there's a broad smile of exhilaration at fear conquered on his face. I really enjoy that kind of conclusion to a speech. You could also challenge your audience to apply what you've told them in your speech. So let's say you were doing a speech on the importance of taking action. You might say something like the following: let us turn from spectators into participants. Let's recall the inspiring words of Theodore Roosevelt, who said, "Far better it is to dare mighty things, to win glorious triumphs, even though checkered by failure, than to remain with those poor spirits who neither enjoy much nor suffer much, because they live in the grey twilight that knows not victory nor defeat." We have too much to do to sit on the sidelines. We need you to step out of the grey twilight and into the bright sunshine, so that we can all see the dawn of a new day. So that's just an example of challenge. That last sentence, we need you to step out of the grey twilight and into the bright sunshine. For all of us, that's the challenge at the end. And of course, there's a quotation used in that passage as well, which I didn't write, by the way. I got it from this fantastic website that I mentioned earlier, 6 minutes. So again, you could use a famous quotation. That would be the third example, third way of finishing a speech. You could do it. I do it with care, because sometimes I think the best way to finish a speech is with your own words, rather than the words of someone else. Because as I said, the people, your audience, are going to be leaving with that thought, flying around in their heads as they leave. So it would be great, wouldn't it, if the words that are echoing in their minds are yours and not someone else's. However, sometimes a quotation really does hit the spot. So let me give you an example. Say you had a speech about maintaining self-confidence in the face of adversity. You could say something like, in the words of Victor Hugo, "Be like the bird that, passing on her flight a while on boughs too slight, feels them give way beneath her, and yet sings, knowing that she hath wings." Whatever you say in your conclusion, whatever you say, I encourage you to end with an attitude, not a platitude. So that really concludes the main thrust of what I hoped to deliver to you with this recording, with this video. So we've looked at the material that you use, and we've looked at some ideas for structure. The next part of finishing off our house is delivery. Delivery is the third key component, and when you combine your carefully selected material and your logical structure, you really will wow your audience. Delivery consists of the physical aspects of your speech, and that's why I've saved that for the face-to-face, because it's really about how you use your voice and how you use gestures and your body language, because a lot of this stuff is really unconscious, and you don't really always realize how your body can really enhance your message and how much more powerfully you can use your body to enhance your message. So we'll look at that when we meet face to face. So in summary, today we've looked at tons of, there's just so much we've looked at, and I do hope that you will rewind, fast forward, and find the bits that you're interested in and have a look at them again, because there's been a stack of information here today. We've looked at 2 of the 3 key components of a really great presentation. We've looked at what constitutes your material, and you've got loads of it, the different ways you can use it. The really important thing, though, I think, is to select only that material which really serves to add credibility and memorability of your message. We've also looked at the structure of a speech, and we've really focused on the ways you can add impact with your opening, your conclusion, and the power of the 3-part outline. So, next steps. You have started an amazing journey towards becoming a more effective, confident communicator, and I am so pleased, proud, honoured to be here to help you on your way. We were going to have a workshop at Fox Hills. We'll organise something face-to-face. Yeah, the next thing for you to do really is to just take that information and write your own presentation. You might have something in mind already. Look at it with fresh eyes now that you've got all of this theory that you can apply. Have a look at what you might have already done, and apply the new stuff and see what happens. Write your own presentation. Remember that the tips and ideas I've given today are only suggestions. Some of them work for me and some of them don't, and it's going to be the same for you. Choose the ideas that really speak to you, and if you're not sure, try them out. Try them out. Try the ones that really speak to you, the ones that you can really imagine working for you, and as you grow in confidence, you can try other ideas, but for now, just do what feels right for you. If you do find it difficult to choose a topic to do a presentation on, I suggest the one topic I know 100% certain you are an expert on: yourself. If you struggle to find a suitable topic to write about, just write a little bit about yourself. Even if it's only a few paragraphs, that's completely fine, because I'll be able to make suggestions for other information and stories that you could include in addition to the delivery skills that you will learn when we meet face to face. If you have any questions at all, please don't hesitate to email me, vanessa@thefireinside.co.uk, or we can even connect on Skype if you like. My Skype ID is On Fire Together. So good luck, enjoy the writing, just sit down, let it flow, listen to this recording again, and I'm sure that you're going to come up with some really powerful, important stuff that we can work on when we see each other next. Okay, thank you very much, and we'll see you soon.